Welcome back to Mind Force, a show where we explore the mindsets, habit, and the lessons that help us lead with purpose and live with resilience. I'm your host, Nate Shear, and today we're digging into the relationship between discipline and compassion, what it takes to lead yourself well, especially when no one's watching. We'll talk about the tension between pushing hard and resting well, the mindset between accountability, and why leadership always starts with the person in the mirror. If you've ever struggled to stay consistent, show up for yourself, or lead with integrity, this conversation is for you. This guest I'm super excited to have on the show. First guest of no show, so sorry, Joe. I was having a terrible time with my allergies, laid down for a quick nap, or so I thought, and, slept right through on a Saturday. I've listened to many of his episodes of the Llama Lounge and used a lot of his great material for my episode. I think it was Episode 5, shoot, don't quote me on that. One of my beginning episodes with Chief Ronnie Woods. So it really helped me get ready for that conversation. I had a lot of cool questions from some of his previous episodes. So let's start with your story. Who are you, and what personal or professional experiences have shaped your view of self-leadership?
Man, Nate, thank you so much for having me on. And I'll say we both flaked on each other once, so I think we're even now. I was a bit ill one day, and we had to push it down a couple months because Nate's podcast is so popular. He has so many people. The calendar is full, so we had to push that a couple months. And then, unfortunately, he wasn't feeling too good, so here we are. But I'm super grateful we finally got together and got to chat. Man, who am I? So a little bit about who I am. I would say, I try to go in order of precedence for me and what the most important things. I'm a man of faith. So first thing I would say is I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And I really think that, God put me on this planet to help others achieve their best results, meet their maximum potential, and anything I could do to help that. I am a retired active duty Air Force member, just retired actually this last year. I started off in the engineering career field, and I transitioned later on. Did some career broadening in now called Military Family Readiness Center, then Airmen and Family Readiness Center. And for anybody who might be listening that's not in the military, that's kind of like a social services center on the base. And we can go into a full story about that too. But I really gained a lot of my purpose and meaning and quite a few attributes I think that were vital for leadership, like generosity, kindness, and patience, which I really didn't have as a young manager, leader in the engineering career field at the time. And then later on, I continued serving, became a chief master sergeant, and eventually got called to the Pentagon to be the chief of enlisted force development, which means I was the senior advisor to all Air Force leadership on all things how we do training and development, education, and also career broadening across the enlisted force, which is about 400,000 plus folks across the world. Loved it, but there really wasn't another thing that I wanted to do. So I decided to challenge myself, make the transition. I wanted to see how I would do in the corporate world. So I became an HR business partner, and I advise business leaders on how to do all things people related, taking care of their people, workforce planning, workforce development, and all things there. And one of my side gigs is that I'm a chief learning officer for a company called C2H, which is a solution-based leadership consultation firm. We offer coaching, development, and also help companies with policy if they need some support there, but a bunch of other things as well. And I dabble. I do a podcast. As you mentioned, I had a podcast with my friends back in the day called the Llama Lounge. Since then, that was retired a couple years ago, and I got super busy working in the Pentagon. When I started seeing that I was getting close to retiring, I decided to restart the podcast game again. And now I have a podcast called the Waypoint Better Podcast, which is about all things personal and professional improvement. And yeah, that's a couple things I do. And then also I'm active duty. I'm a spouse of an active duty airman. My wife is a dental hygienist by trade, but she's the senior operations manager or senior enlisted leader of the dental squadron here at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. And she oversees all the dental operations on the base. Yeah, but that's just a little bit about me. Super grateful that you asked me to come on and talk about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming out. So I'd asked Chief Hope Skibitsky what she thought was the most surprising thing about transitioning. So now, since you just transitioned, what was the most shocking? You got to narrow it down to one.
Man, the most shocking, and this is probably everybody's transition journey is going to be different. Honestly, I think the most shocking thing for me in my transition was that it was such a smooth transition. I think I'm still, I'm looking at LinkedIn, I'm looking at my Facebook, and I've seen a lot of my colleagues that are retiring right now. And I could feel like I could totally understand, you've been doing something for 20, 26, 30 years, and now you're transitioning. I've even heard someone say, I feel like I went from a hero to a zero. And I just, I didn't experience that. And I think a lot of it was because I really never saw. I am so grateful for the Air Force. I think it did so many things for me. Really postured me from a life of poverty to being where I am today, and gave me a lot of meaning and purpose throughout. But I never saw it as who I am. I never saw being a chief as who I am or any of the roles, positions. So I think I just had a mental strategy of knowing that one day a transition was happening. So I just mentally prepared to remember that I'm Joe. And I think that really helped. And yeah, just kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. So yeah, I think the most shocking thing, and by the way, I'm still in the middle of transitioning, so I might be speaking too early, because I think, transition takes a while. But employment wise, life wise, all the things, I think that the most surprising thing was that I just felt like it happened very smoothly.
Okay. Good, good. Congrats. I'm glad it went pretty smooth. This next question, I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase it. I don't want it to come off, disrespectful by any means, but I'm really curious. It feels like a lot of people that have left, a lot of chiefs, colonels, a lot of people in leadership seem like they're gravitating towards leadership companies, life coaching. What do you think has given you like the experience or, the ability to speak on it? Like you or anyone, like what gives, the ability or the experience to speak on leadership? Because it seems like everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's an over, dramatic generalization, but what are your thoughts on it feeling like there's a lot of life coaches all of a sudden? Maybe it's just me and I'm getting old.
No, I think you're right. There's probably a lot of, and also probably the group of people that we center ourselves or have around us is probably the people that are interested in those things. So leadership coaching, I kind of see them all as different things. So, and sometimes there's some overlap there. I would say one of the things that probably uniquely suit some of us, and myself included, I think, is that I'm in the corporate world right now. I can tell you that, right? I will say with 100% certainty that I'll broadly say the entire military, but I know the Air Force specifically is that we develop the greatest leaders. I mean, like the fact that you're continuously given opportunities to grow, to move around, there's a lot of different aspects. I'm in the middle of writing a book, and part of it is talking about cultivating your leadership potential, because we promote for potential. We don't promote for past things. How well you performed in the past doesn't necessarily mean you're ready for a promotion. Your potential is a big part of it. And we don't often talk about why. But in the military, we put you in positions for you to gain opportunities to develop that leadership potential. And some of those, I would say, is a depth and a breadth of experience. We have the depth that you gain at the beginning. This is your job. You're learning the competencies there. But if you want to continue to elevate as a leader, you're going to have to develop a broad breadth of experience as well, because you're going to be put in situations where you're required to lead people that you don't know their job specifically. As a CE chief, I had the privilege of overseeing EOD teammates, fire department teammates, and they put me in a bomb suit and sit in a live fire, but I still don't know I would be dumb to think that I know their job at a technical level, but I have to have the breadth to understand how they play in the big picture, right? And we do that in the military by moving, PCSing people from place to place, different mission sets, career broadening opportunities like I got, as well as just even within units. So we do a lot of that. Of course, we have formal development and some other things I think are vitally important is as you grow, you gain opportunities to develop your, I would say, peer leadership or just leadership of people who don't have to listen to you, and I think that's the greatest sign of a leader is that you can influence people that you don't have authority over, you don't have positional power over. And we have opportunities like that regularly. And as chiefs, we really don't have any positional power over each other, but we have to work together to solve a problem. So plenty of opportunities there. So I think that just the experience would put a lot of us in great positions to be able to coach others on leadership, as well as get into consulting on leadership or step into leadership roles. I think the big thing is if you don't have the humility and curiosity to learn, because if you're coming out of the military, unless you're just going to be advising military leaders, you have to learn the business side of things of those leaders that you're working with. So it's a different language, and I used to think that the military has a lot of acronyms, come work on my corporate company that has 110,000 people across the world. I mean,
Mm.
like there's a lot of acronyms there too. So I had to learn a brand new language. But yeah, so in a roundabout way, I would say that we're uniquely suited to be able to do those things, and we're also very well educated. So yeah, that's what I think puts us in good positions.
I think that gets lost. I mean, unless you have military in your family and you're familiar with how the things work, because I've talked to civilians and I remember this one quote, it'll stick with me, I think, forever. The quote was, "I thought you just practiced war." And I was like, one, I don't really know what that means. Like, two, like we have 128 different jobs. We have people that are handing out stuff at the gym. We have finance, we have HR, we have, fill in the blank. And so not everyone's shooting or rolling around in the dirt so I think that is a good reminder to everyone. Like we are continuously going through PME, professional military education, and always, going through different opportunities to run events, which some people, will come up with a negative term, bake sales and things like that. But it gives you the ability to manage projects and people and deadlines. And so I think you're absolutely right. We're always kind of working on stuff. Well, I'd like to flip the mic before we dive into your pillars. What's one question you'd like to ask me?
I'm gonna shift it away a little bit from this, from the pillars. I like to ask you a question I think is really important from a resiliency perspective overall. What's the best thing to happen to you this last month?
Hmm. The best thing that happened to me this last month. Ooh, that's probably a tie between I picked my mom up from the airport and I picked up my oldest daughter. So can't really pick one or the over. Me and my mom, I grew up in, Section 8 houses and hand-me-downs. And so it was me and my mom against the world for a lot of my life. So we have a really deep bond. And then my oldest daughter, her mom lives at Langley now. And we've had the hardest time getting her. I'm supposed to have her for the summers, but with COVID and moving to Japan, and then she was in Germany and then they got locked down. And then she moved and I moved to Florida, just general military stuff. It's been really rough the last couple of years. Like I went her really bad last year, but it's like, hey, do you want to come hang out with us? We have no furniture. She's like, no, I think I'm good. I'm like, that's totally understandable. Like we're, eating off the floor and whatnot. Like you don't have to. So this is the first year in a couple of years. And so it's been awesome to have the house full, even though 6 people is way too much for, I think this like 300 or 1,300 square foot house. Feels like everyone's on top of each other. It's a little crazy, but just full of love. My wife, it was her birthday when we picked up my oldest daughter, and she said, best birthday ever, have everyone back and just feeling the love throughout the dinner times and the board games and everything. So full of love right now. It's awesome. I wish it were all the time, but got to go through life and do a little co-parenting. But yeah, the love that's flowing through the house right now. What's the biggest thing for you?
Man, I have a lot, but I would say the thing that happened most recently was that my wife and I were actually able to host our church elders, like our pastor, our lead pastor, and all of them at our house. We've been talking about this for a couple months, but people need babysitters and all that stuff, and it all came to culmination this past Saturday. And they got to come in, and we got to serve them like a gourmet meal. And cooking is one of my favorite things to do, so I made them some great stuff, and really had to have conversations. And I think that they felt really appreciated, which was our goal, because sometimes church growing is a difficult thing, and then it's not like they're getting paid a lot. This isn't a mega church. It's very challenging for them. So for us to wine and dine them, it really filled our cups and gave us even more opportunity to get to know them even better. So that was the most recent thing that I could say that really stuck out.
It's always hard being in the military too, like finding your new one. It was actually really awesome. A couple days ago, I got an email just out of the blue from my pastor, Calvary Chapel there out at Okinawa, at Japan 2 stations ago. And he's like, hey, just on the mind, see if there's anything you wanted to pray for. And I was like, oh, it's so nice to hear something, out of the blue and, being able to take care of stuff like that. But finding your new spot, you got to try a couple and see the connection. You want to make sure you got that fit and whatnot. And so I think a lot of people, they get the benefit of staying for 10 or 15 and we're staying for 2 and then feeling sad. And, you get to meet new people and there's positives too, but it is a little sad when you got to move to the next one. Your first pillar is self-discipline. So I love stories on the show. Is there a story or a moment in your life when you realized discipline had to be non-negotiable?
Man, so I think that if I thought back, there are probably many opportunities where that should have been more apparent. And I would honestly say that I probably thought I was pretty disciplined. In many ways, I was. But I think the biggest time where an example of when I really realized it was non-negotiable is when I let it go. And I let it go primarily in my physical fitness. When I was stationed in Korea, it was my second tour to Osan, and I think it was about 2.5 year tour. I was there for quite a while, and and if anybody's been to Osan Air Base or Kunsan, and you see all the power outages and all of the other things, the challenges that come with a failing infrastructure, we used to joke about it. It's like, this infrastructure, this base has been built, 1 year at a time for the last 50 some years, so it's like, because we rotate out so fast, not a lot of continuity. So we it was a great tour, busy. We worked hard, we played hard, and at the end of that, I walked away with the line number for chief and an extra 20 pounds on me. And so I get to my next base, I just go for a run. I wouldn't say I was ever like a long distance runner at that point, but I never had issues. And I think I ran about a quarter of a mile, just about a lap, and I was already about to fall out. Like I was huffing and puffing. I was just out of shape. I was super discouraged about the whole situation, angry, and really had to work my way back. And I had to like really lean on discipline to go the full other way, and to the point where I was running, I started off with just, hey, can I just run for 5 minutes without falling out? Let me do 10, and I just kept on increasing that. And I felt like my mental health started getting better. I started feeling better. I started noticing things. It got to a point, Nate, where I started running a half marathon every Sunday. And I was running 10Ks every day. And I just got to the best shape of my life. My blood work was great. But until then, I don't think, I didn't even realize how much I let myself slide. My discipline had completely slid when it comes to physical fitness. And that impacts your mental fitness. That impacts your comprehensive fitness overall. So I think that was when I really realized that like, this is a non-negotiable now. I actually have a quad chart where I fill in all the things I'm going to be doing for the week. And one of the non-negotiables is physical fitness. Not going to ever let that slide again.
Awesome. Okay. So a little bit of, shock and awe, a little rude awakening. So I think everything in life is kind of within balance. So one thing I like to talk about on the show is kind of how those come together. So you want discipline, you want to be able to hold yourself there. How do you avoid burnout or other things? Everything's spectrum, right? So how do you kind of go through some of those discipline things, but without being so strict that, you're just kind of burning out?
Yeah. We were talking about how to cultivate leadership potential. One of the things I didn't say then, and I'll slide in now, is the ability to adapt to different situations and have some mental agility as well. And being able to understand that, you want to maintain the discipline, but discerning where it is burning you out and you're not leveraging your support as much. Because if you're trying to do everything, there's no way you're going to do everything effectively. You can do it maybe for a while in surge operations, but eventually, it's just not sustainable. And I think that, having that wisdom to know that it's time to shift, have some grace with yourself, be like, all right, I can't do everything right now. Being able to have that proverbial gear shifter and kind of shifting down for a moment and seeing the world the way it is and what's going on and how you're impacting your family and your coworkers, and also checking your ego to realize that, hey, I'm not the only one that can do all of this stuff. There's probably some other people that should be doing all this stuff. So I think it's a healthy harmonization of what are your values that are non-negotiable, and then what are you trying to achieve, and then really being able to harmonize that and realize that, if it's something that's non-negotiable that you have to do, and that should be a very small list, to be honest with you, then you do those things. The other stuff, you look at it like, how do I become more efficient in these things? How do I leverage technology? How do I leverage my team? What should I be delegating or empowering others to do? And asking for help. And I think that there's a balance there, and I really think that's that's a good way to develop your mental agility and not think that it's just one way.
That makes sense. Yeah, some deeper reflection. I think it's something we really miss. We want to go faster all the time, and slowing down and self-reflection is really important. I've noticed that throughout the episodes. Journaling comes up a lot. Meditation comes up a lot. There's a lot of things where going slower, which is funny because I feel like that doesn't come up that often. It's like faster, do more, look overwhelmed, like kind of those things, which leads into your next pillar, which is personal accountability. So another time, if you could share a story, can you share a time where accountability changed the course of your career?
Yeah, man, there's been personal accountability is probably something that's been in my career quite a bit, where I realized that I needed to be more accountable to things, whether that was in my relationships, whether it was at work. I'm trying to come up with a specific example. Man, yeah, because it's something that I feel like that I try to embed in my life, right? Being open to feedback, taking it and doing something with it. But yeah, I would say probably a personal accountability story. I remember there was a time where I was going too fast. We just talked about slowing down, right? And I was trying to impress maybe a young tech sergeant at the time. But I happened to be an NCOIC of a shop, and in my type of units, typically you're going to be a master sergeant and to be NCOIC because the size of the shops are pretty big. So so I was typically the younger person in the room. I might have even been a staff sergeant at the time. I was running a work center, and there was some situations that came up where a bunch of our folks were deploying, and one of my guys was at a party and did something inappropriate. And my colleague, my peer that ran the work center that had the other person that was involved called me to give me a heads up. It was a peer-to-peer conversation. So in my mind, I'm just like, I don't think I'm appreciating the fact that someone's telling me something that they're not really authorized to tell me. They're just kind of giving me a heads up, right? As a trusted confidant, like, hey, I'm not thinking through that. I'm thinking, man, if this guy's not going to be able to deploy, that's going to look bad on our shop. And I need to figure out I need to rapidly find out if he's going to be unable to deploy. So let me call the first sergeant and ask him if this is going down so I can try to solve this problem. Well, immediately the first sergeant, like, who told you that? Right? And then, and I'm still like dumb, this is young, very immature Joe Bogdan. And, I just tell who told me, not even realizing that this was between two confidants. And of course, he gets in trouble for sharing that information with me. So I break trust unintentionally, and he's very upset with me. And he's a person I look up to, as a peer, but he's someone I look up to. And I just felt like trash, I remember. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for us to make excuses for stuff like that. Um, maybe he shouldn't have told me then, or I was trying to just do this or that, and I saw it as an opportunity to just contact him. He avoided my phone calls for a while. He was angry. But eventually I got in contact with him and I shared that, I was completely just apologetic. I wasn't making excuses. I didn't make anything that it wasn't. It was just I made the error. And, I think that was a good experience for me early on to be brave enough and have the courage to do that, because after that, I think it was just kind of natural. He forgave me, and it took a while for us to gain trust again. And, we still converse to this day here and there. Yeah, it's I think going through it and being courageous enough to say you're wrong, apologize, and also there's a third part of that, fix it, fix the problem, fix what you did. I think those are things that unfortunately became a lost art nowadays.
Yeah, and I like the no excuses. Unfortunately, you just got to own it. There's cause and effect. It's not fun, but you just got to own it. I'm curious from your standpoint, you've now moved into HR. And so you mentioned feedback, and I find this something that's very difficult. Like, I'll ask for, hey, is there anything I can work on? And then everyone's like, oh yeah, everything's good. How have you seen like a 360, or what's kind of been something you've seen where you can, I'm sure that a book answer is build rapport and they'll tell you, which I'm sure that is probably pretty accurate, but is there a format or any tips or tricks you've seen on actually getting meaningful feedback?
I think that 360s are great, especially if you are mature enough to select the right people. Because sometimes you don't have that opportunity. It really depends, right? How the feedback mechanism is launched. But if you have the opportunity and you have the maturity to pick the right people, then I think you can get some truly meaningful feedback. Especially if they're able to be anonymous as well. You can kind of just pick the people, but you're not sure who's giving the feedback. You might be able to figure it out, but you just put it out there, right? And you do a broad enough, you cast a net broadly so that you can get enough people where it's going to be maybe even more difficult, and maybe even put the messaging in there. It's like, there's a lot of people on this, so please don't feel like it's anonymous. You can tell me who you are, but if you don't feel comfortable, there's a lot of people that are taking a survey, so it's going to be very difficult for me to probably get the determine who it is anyway. So just kind of being honest with it. But if you could do that, because I have this personal saying that sometimes people get upset about. Not everybody deserves feedback, and not everybody deserves to give feedback. And what I mean by that is some people, I don't mean that if you're not showing the attributes that you deserve feedback, that you shouldn't get feedback. I think leaders are responsible for giving feedback regardless. But if you're always making excuses or you get hostile when you get any type of corrective feedback or any type of feedback that might not be exactly what you want to hear, you don't deserve to get feedback. You know, it doesn't mean that, people shouldn't give it to you still. There's this idea of deserving, but it's like you're actually not showing the accountability to be able to receive feedback. And I promise you in life, if you continue to show that, even the bravest people that want to give you that feedback, they'll just stop. You're not going to grow. But sometimes the reason why people can't receive feedback well is because the delivery is so terrible. Some people really need to gain some interpersonal skills to be able to deliver feedback in a timely manner where it makes sense, and also hopefully build a bridge, before you need to use it. Like I already have a relationship and rapport with you. Tying all that together to the 360 is pick people who you respect, what they think of you, right? Pick people that you value their feedback. If you're a leader, I mean, maybe not put the person you gave discipline to a little while ago. You know what I mean? Like you're probably going to get some skewed feedback, but also don't ask only the people are going to give you good feedback. You know what I mean? Like that are just that give everybody great feedback. Like look for the people who you feel like can give you the most meaningful feedback. Beyond that, like if you can figure out who those people are, you probably don't even need a 360 feedback mechanism anymore. You could just go ask them. So I think that there's a couple of things at play. One is I would ask myself, what's it like to be on the other side of me when I ask somebody for feedback? Because if I'm the person that's always making excuses or, I agree, but if I'm using terms like that and I'm not fixing it or I'm not fixing it at all, like say I accept the feedback, but I'm not fixing anything, maybe there's a reason why I'm not getting honest feedback, right? Because how I respond to feedback is probably going to be it's going to be attributed to how much feedback I continue to get. But yeah, also like do some discernment to when you get feedback to determine which parts of it are valuable. Sometimes
Yeah,
it
that's
might not be
interesting.
valuable.
Yeah, some of it's rough sometimes. Like you said, like not everyone gives good feedback. Because sometimes it's like, this flight's the worst. And it's like, okay, I can't make the flight better
Yeah,
with
it's
the
not
flight is
meaningful.
the worst.
Yeah,
Like, thank
it's not
you.
meaningful
Like, I
feedback.
don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. I've heard some negative stuff a little bit with the anonymous because it does open you up for people to say whatever. But I think, like you said, if it's wide enough and ranging enough, then you can kind of go through the different ones. So if you have the one off or it seems a little odd, then someone's just full of hate and dropping that all in there. But yeah, that's good.
And hopefully you can discern that, right? You can see it and be like this person clearly, for one, they'll probably give you feedback that's not even constructive feedback. It's not something that you can do. It's just a complete character assassination. And at that point, you discern that you roll that one up and throw it into the ocean. That's not something that you let impact you, right? So I think that's pretty important when it comes to feedback. And hey, Nate, I'm going to throw this out there. I think that we too often attribute good feed from people that we like and it's bad feedback if we don't like the person. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Just because you don't like somebody doesn't mean that they can't provide you some feedback that might be beneficial.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kind of associating with the person. Interesting. Your next pillar is self-care for resilience. I think sometimes people hear self-care and they're thinking massages and it's soft and things like that. Like, what does self-care mean for all the listeners?
I think self-care is gonna look different for different people. Some people, it might be the massage, right? Some people, it might be being proactive about doing something that they don't really want to do, like put on the running shoes and go do that thing like we talked about earlier. That might be the greatest form of self-care for you. But when I think of self-care, I think of it like preventive maintenance. Now, what are the things that you can do to take care of yourself for the long haul? Whether that's a proverbial oil change, like you might need to go, get a mani and a pedi and do all the stuff to make you feel better. And you might be looking at your feet and it's like, man, I really need something done. There might be some stuff there. It might be a day of rest because you're grinding so hard and you're out there and you're even working out a lot and you're doing all this stuff and your body is telling you, hey, like, can we chill today? I think listening, being attuned to your body, and having a discernment between just feeling, I just want to be comfortable all the time versus like, hey, I just need to pull back a little bit right now. But for me, I think it's really important for when I think of self-care is how can you live in what brings you joy for at least that period of time? Whether that's 1, 2, 3 hours, that might be breaking, just, cutting out some time for you to review scripture. If you're a person of faith, it could be cutting out time for you to be able to go get a job or go lift some weights or do something just for you. It could be reading a book, going for a hike. But whatever that is, I don't think that there's a recipe that says this is your menu and you have to go do that for self-care. I think once again, it requires some deep work on the person's behalf. And a question that I would ask for people, if they're not sure what that is like, where do you get your inspiration from?
Feel that
If you're
recharge.
inspired by your kids being with them, maybe that's how you get, that's your self-care. If it's in a room by yourself with a book, maybe that's your self-care. So I think, where do you get your inspiration from? Because I think it's so important that we deliberately seek the inspiration versus just hope that it falls into our lap.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you think of a moment where prioritizing your self-care made you a better leader?
Yeah, I mean, I can go, the example I already shared before, because I'll tell you what, once I started being in shape and making sure that I was taking care of myself, it definitely made me more effective, and I was able to see things more broadly. And I was like, hey, I can see when somebody's being burnt out. It's because I know I've seen it, I've done it. I've been in surgery operations for a long time. So there was definitely that example. And I would say now, as a HR business partner, I can see, because what I do now is, I think there's a lot of strategizing with leaders to take care of their people. But people are gonna people. So when you have a lot of people, they're really people in this week. You're gonna have a lot of what we call employee relations issues, which are gonna be like your disciplinary stuff. And sometimes that can really burn you out if you don't take care of yourself. Have micro breaks throughout the day. Because if I'm going from one meeting where I'm having sitting in on a termination of an employee to the next meeting, we're talking about a RIF, and then the next meeting after that, we're issuing discipline. I mean, you just do that, times that by 5 days a week, multiple weeks in a row, and you're probably going to be a bit stressed out. So I think that understanding that has made me a better advisor of leaders, also allowed me to be a better example for others by literally just taking care of myself, showing my calendar that I'm actually taking time off, that I'm taking a lunch break, all those things I think are examples of that.
Did anyone ever call you out or anything as you were going through the tour in Korea? Like, hey, do you guys do group runs or something? And they're like, oh, you're not really pulling your weight. Or how did you kind of come to that realization? Was it just stepping on the scale after the tour, or what was the aha?
I think it was stepping on, it was actually that run is probably the biggest aha. Because throughout the tour, I think it was just slowly degrading, and I didn't necessarily notice it when we were doing our runs. And then also, there's times where you have a power outage and a water break at the same time, and your base is flooding and out of power. And, PT is not a priority today. I'm over there, So I think there was times where there was probably long periods of time where there wasn't somebody to even see me or me to really even test my own fitness to see, So I think it was just a long 2.5 years that kind of resulted in that thing. And there was a lot of other issues there too that came from that assignment, with that lack of discipline, impacting my family life and all things in between.
Yeah, I think people always want things to be big things. And I've noticed throughout the shows, I think the small things, like James Clear, the 1% better, either getting 1% better or 1% worse. He argues you're just not going to maintain. You're going to go one direction or another. So you make the good choice or you make the bad choice, which for some odd reason reminds me of the quote from Dante's Peak, which is a super old movie, right? Where he talks about putting the frog in the water. If you put the frog in the boiling water, it jumps out immediately because it's super hot. But if you slowly turn up the heat, you can cook the frog. So I think, over time, you can kind of deteriorate and things like that. That seems like the easier way, where you just kind of, because it was dramatic, you have been like, oh, I need to get back in there. But yeah, that's a good thing to remember. You're making those small choices, small actions all the time in one direction or the other. I kind of agree with him. I don't think you maintain. There's not very many things. You're going to eat the piece of cheesecake and, get a little bigger maybe, or, there's not a lot of just neutral. Your
Death
final
of a power, a bunch of by 1,000 paper cuts. You don't really realize it. You're just putting on extra weight, and you're dealing. That frog thing. So it was funny because I actually had that in one of my classes for my master's, and we talked about that quite a bit. And then someone, and I don't know if it's true, I never Googled it after, said it was complete horse crap. It's not even true. A frog's going to be sitting there. Once it gets hot, it's jumping out. I think it was actually, yeah, it was somebody, a thought leader that said that. It was Adam Grant, I think, actually, in one of his books. He had brought up, he said, it's just a weird thing that we share and we all understand what it means, but it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, use it as a reference, but, not biologically correct.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, your final pillar is general leadership. So I'd like to see if you could narrow it down to one. It's kind of tough. One principle to teach future leaders starting out today. What would it be?
One principle. My goodness. If I was going to narrow it down to one principle, and it's pretty tough because I got like 7 things floating in my head right now, but I would say curiosity and humility because I think they're interlinked. And I think that it's important for us to cultivate that. It's not something, it's something that we can easily just not think about, not consider. But I found that the most curious and humble leaders are the ones that can not only make their teams feel valued, but also they're continuously growing. If you're curious, then when I ask you, what is it that drives you? Or what are your aspirations? I'm not just going to walk in and be like, hey, Nate, clearly you want to be a chief master sergeant. So I'm just going to be here telling you how to do that, right? Like, I'm actually going to ask you those questions with genuine curiosity. Also, when you have an issue, maybe you have a performance issue right now, I'm going to ask you with genuine curiosity if something's going on, right? That's impacting you because I've seen a change. I think it's something that, to me, it's honestly, to me, one of the most important, if not the most important leadership trait in my things. Because I think that the more curious a leader is, the more effective they'll be. And that overlaps really well with humility.
Yeah.
Knowing that you don't know all the answers. Not just fake humble either. I mean, like truly knowing. And I have a saying that, the wiser I become, the broader the plane of my own ignorance I discover. Like, which is just a fancy way of saying the more I learn, the more I know I don't know, right? So, I think it's really important to have that curiosity and humility. And oddly enough, people might think that's opposite of credibility, but it'll gain credibility.
Yeah, I think when you're real, that really comes across. And I don't think that's widely, known, or it's known, but it doesn't seem like it's internalized very well. Like if you are real to yourself, I think you do gain a lot of points, even if that's, opening up about things that are difficult. We now have Brené Brown and things like that. So I think we're getting closer to, being able to open up and being a little bit more real. But in my experience, I wanted to be tough and perfect and all those things. And when I've been able to connect with people the most, it's over co-parenting or divorce or losing my dad or my grandparents or, these things that are difficult, and being able to be like, hey, I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I've seen something that is difficult. Let's sit in the space together. And, that connection has been stronger than any other, me trying to be like, I had a perfect day today.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre to me because I remember at OTS we went through and they were like, you'll have no bad days. Like, I'll remember that for my whole life. I forget who said it, but we were in a big thing and they said, you can't, bring down your flight. You can't do that. So you'll have no bad days. I was like, that makes no sense. We are not robots. Terrible
advice.
Like, what?
Something I land on with that is that you should be inspiring and not impressing people. If you want to be a leader, you should inspire and not impress. And a lot of people's like, well, how do I inspire? I'm not exactly an inspirational person. I was like, inspiring is simple. Just show them a future that's better than what they have right now that they can actually attain. And if you are looking superhuman like Superman, people can't do that. They know that they can't. Internally, they know that. And you're just putting on off a facade too. So you're not inspiring them. You may impress them. Like I'm impressed by Superman because I know I can't do all those things, but I'm not inspired by him. So I think it's really important for us to consider like, hey, are we just trying to impress people or are we trying to inspire people? Because inspiration requires us to show our human side of things.
I've always wondered that too. And I guess you did the enlisted force development and stuff like that, because I think it's a little odd. Like I understand where it comes from, but I still think it's odd where shirts and, different duties, we're picking people that are, for lack of a better term, Firewall 5 or an older term that we don't use anymore, but they're like perfect on paper. And I know you want like good people, but at the same time, like I want to go to someone when I'm having troubles that actually has been through some stuff. And like, I don't want to go to the guy that's like perfectly squared. I'm not opening up. Like they say the open door policy, but at the same time, like the door is physically open, but I don't know if I'm opening up to someone that is perfect, but I realize, where that comes from. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's funny because it almost didn't matter anyway because everything was inflated, and then really you were just doing attrition by pulling the few out for whatever reason. And they must have really angered somebody. But yeah, I think that, when you think of nominative positions, I think we look at it too much from the performance base of how they were versus looking at the potential of what they can be. And I think, and I don't want to get too deep into this because I'm probably getting in trouble. But so when we talk about this is essentially talent management. right? This is what you're bringing up is talent management. And in the military, at least in the Air Force, I think that we try to conflate too much stuff at one time. It gets conflated because we look at your EPB, OPB, and we already are just we're recording how you performed that previous year, but we're also putting on that same document where we think you should go, like what you should do next, right? And I think that if we were able to separate that and like, okay, we're just talking about what you've done so far. This is how you performed in the role in which you are in right now, how well you did it. And then we had a pause break, a couple months go by, and then we start talking about talent management. Okay, we have your performance of past, which is maybe, I'll just draw out a number, 33% of what we're looking at for your promotion or your opportunity to go do something else, your special duty, whatever it might be, the nomination. We look at your potential, which should be like how your records show your adaptability is, your mental agility, and also some subjective view of you as you're performing. What does your potential look like? And then we put that in the gronkulator, and then you come out with, okay, where do I put you on the grid of where I'm going to? And this is how we do it in the civilian side. We don't do it all at the same time. So in the Air Force, we kind of do it together when we're talking about enterprise level leadership, and then we do it separate when it comes to just your functional succession planning. But in reality, it should be like both of them should be very separate things, because I think that's where you get conflated and you do the promote someone to incompetence because they were really good at what they did and you assume they're going to do really well at the next thing. Right. Or you assume that they're not going to be a good first sergeant because they had a ding on one evaluation 3 years ago. You know what I mean? Like now because you have this one process to look at. So I think if we blew it up a little bit, and of course it would cause an administrative load because who wants to do that too? But we do it in my company. So we're right now in the middle of talent review where we're taking how they performed and now looking at their potential and evaluating what developmental opportunities they should get next.
I like that. I like that. Pulling in more than, one thing. That's pretty awesome. I've always wondered, like, I hate to complain about the system because I don't, completely love it, but I hate to complain about something when I don't have the solution. But pulling in multiple things sounds like a pretty good one. I wanted to ask you, we just closed out tech release and master release. If there's anyone listening or coming up on it at a later time, they feel like they've done what they needed to and don't make it, what are your words of wisdom for that?
I think really they should look at themselves, find a mentor that they can maybe even show their records to. Make sure the mentor is somebody who knows how to review records. Make sure that they know what they're looking for. And I share that because sometimes, okay, when I was coming up as an airman, we had the enlisted force structure. I know we have it now, but what we had before, right, called the little brown book, and it would kind of tell you the blueprint of what you should be doing. A lot of people didn't look at it that way. They kind of looked at it as like, if I don't hold to these standards, I'll use this as disciplinary action against my subordinate. but in reality, it was a guide for us to know, okay, how should I be performing right now? Okay, what should I be doing if I'm in this grade? Okay. Also, I can see what I should be doing if I want to show that I can be in the next grade, because it tells you what the next grade should be doing too. So if you're talking about potential, you should already be doing the stuff in the next grade, right? Per the book and per all the suggestions in the book. So if you find a mentor, they should be able to explain to you why that stuff matters in there. For instance, if you go to a mentor and says, well, why does it say that as an NCO, I should go join the NCO club? I should become part of the NCO 5-6 club on base. Or why should I become a part of the top 3? It says I should, but why? If the mentor isn't able to tell you that, hey, it's going to give you broadened perspectives, you're going to be able to network and see people's views from different places around the wing. And it's also going to give you the opportunity to develop some of your peer leadership, because it's going to open up opportunities for you to run some of those projects you talked about earlier, Nate. Not the bake sales, but the projects, right?
Yeah, projects.
And then you're going to learn those things. Then you're going to be showing the adaptability and leadership potential to move up into, higher roles. But if that mentor isn't able to tell you that, and they kind of just project this thing as a check the block for you to go do, then you probably need to go look for a different person. Because I think that a lot of times, we assume that we're doing the best thing ever and our records show it and we're capturing what we did and we're showing that we have potential. But in reality, a lot of those records, if they're not getting promoted, probably aren't showing. There's gaps. There's probably gaps. I've actually seen records where I saw this person that used to be a development advisor, and then every year after that, I saw professional development committee stuff on their eval every year for like 4 years straight. And I was like, so you love professional development? Like, Yeah, I do. I was like, that's cool. I do too. Need to be on your eval anymore because you're screaming one trick pony to me. Right. So I'm not saying don't do it because you're passionate about it, but you need to show some stretch. Get some stretch rules in there. Do something a little bit different so that you can show your adaptability and ability to do things outside of your comfort zone, because that's what leadership's going to be, and show that you can take on more, some capacity and all those things. I think that my advice to them would be really reflect on their stuff, really look at it through the lens of leadership potential. Are you really showing it, displaying it? Are you doing it? Get a mentor to help you show you the path there. And then the last thing I would say is have some grace with yourself, because even if you're hitting birdies all year, someone's still hitting eagles out there. Sometimes it's just timing, you know what I mean? So it's that. But if you posture yourself the best way to be prepared for the next rank, it doesn't mean you'll necessarily get it on your timing, but it means you'll be prepared when it does hit.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes there's some luck in there. Put someone in that I thought was an absolute superstar for, I think, BTZ or something, and they didn't get it, and I was super confused. And then later found out the person that had got picked up for it, like, pulled two people out of a burning car wreck or something. I'm like, you can't even make this stuff up sometimes. So yeah, there's always people out there killing it. We're all doing great stuff. I'd like to try to bring it all together. Joe, what's your final word of encouragement for someone trying to lead better, starting with themselves?
My final word of encouragement is, I share this often when I'm doing professional development courses, is that when it comes to leadership, we have a job. We have a lot of job, and there's a providence of a leader. There's a lot of it, right? But one thing I would say is the more outward focused you're going to be, the more likely people will actually see you as a leader. I don't care what rank you have or what position you have or what your salary is or whatever. The more outward focused you are, the better, because some of us are inward focused and we just think about how we're going to be the best at whatever we're doing. And I liken this to something Pastor Joe B. Martin said one time. He said, well, you could be world class athlete in the relay race, but you're still only running one leg of it and you're sprinting it. Maybe you break the record for one leg of that race and you pass that baton and you fumble it. You guys lost a race. It doesn't matter if you won a world record for that one. Nobody records the one leg, right? I mean, nobody cares about that. So what I mean by this is, one of the most important things I think that leaders should do is continue to develop those around them and be outward. And if you can't hand off correctly, if you get that wrong, you mess up the handoff. What are we doing this for? So just make sure, part of that's going to be you have to take care of yourself. You're going to have to be outward focused to make sure you see what's going on. Be curious, be humble, but pay attention to the handoff. It matters.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Joe, for coming out. This was a real grounded and energizing conversation. Thank you for walking us through the hard work behind strong leadership. You touched on it at the beginning, but where can listeners connect with you and learn a little bit more about the work you're doing?
If they want to message me on any development type stuff, they can reach out to waypointbetter.com. If you can go on there, you're going to see all the stuff, my resources. I sign up for my mailing list. You'll get some free resources there, including your leadership philosophy navigator. Will help you navigate through how to develop your own leadership philosophy, as well as my podcast, which is the Waypoint Better podcast. You can find that on all your platforms. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's going to be the LinkedIn traditional, and the tag is going to be JY Bogdan, but you can just put in Joseph Bogdan. I'm sure you'll find me. And if you want to know more about business related things from how we can help your organization, reach out to c2htransform.com and you'll see our entire team on there.
Thank you much. I think I'm going to have to jump on and check out the Leadership Navigator, because I've always wondered how people come up with their acronym or, all those different things. That'd be really interesting to see how to narrow it down to what the things that are truly important to you. Well, to everyone listening, thank you for showing up today. If something in this episode struck a chord, share it with someone. Please leave a review, and remember, leading yourself is the first act of leadership. This is Mind Force. I love you all. See ya.